The Prime Minister of Jamaica recently stated that Jamaica will become the Singapore of the Western Hemisphere. But the big question is this: is this really possible for a small island like Jamaica? To answer that, we need to look at the numbers, the history, and the choices that made them into who they are today. Back in the 1960s, both Singapore and Jamaica were poor countries. However, Jamaica had a few natural resources, like bauxite, beautiful beaches, and farmland, while Singapore, on the other hand, had almost nothing. It's just a tiny island with no natural resources, no farmland. It doesn't even have enough water to supply its own people. So on paper, Jamaica looked like it had the better chance. But when we fast forward to 2025, Jamaica's GDP per person is around $6,000 and Singapore's GDP per person is around $85,000, more than 12 times higher than Jamaica. And when we look at total economic size, Jamaica is worth $20 billion a year, while Singapore is worth $500 billion a year, 26 times larger than Jamaica. This means that every month, Singapore is making $47 billion, which is more than what Jamaica makes in its entire year. So, how was a country that is smaller than the parish of St. Catherine outperform Jamaica more than 10x? And what could the island do to eventually catch up? To figure this one out, we'll have to go back to where it all started. Singapore became independent in 1965. At first, things were looking really bad. Unemployment was high, the poverty rate was also high, and corruption was a real problem around the country. But under Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the country built quite an ambitious plan focusing on four main pillars. The first one was building an export-driven economy. Singapore sits at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, right next to the Strait of Malacca. This is one of the busiest sea routes in the world. About 40% of global trade and 1/3 of the world's oil shipment passes through the strait. They also leaned heavily into manufacturing. Even though they initially started off making clothes, rubber, and textiles, over time they shifted to more advanced and precision engineering, like electronics, petrochemicals, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and advanced electronics. Then there was the Economic Development Board, which acted as a bridge between the private sector and the government. ECB had the ability to offer tax breaks and other incentives, with a certain level of independence. This gave investors confidence that they would be dealing with changes in policies every few years and could confidently invest in the country. The third pillar was a zero-tolerance approach on corruption. The government strengthened the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau and gave it the power to investigate anyone, including any high-ranking government official, judges, and even ministers. The punishment for any corruption-related crimes was also very severe. However, at the same time, they also decided to pay government officials really well, matching private sector wages. This was to reduce the temptation for things like corruption, and also so that the government sector could attract more talented and highly qualified individuals. And the fourth pillar was education. The country invested a large portion of their income into education. During the 1960s and 70s, the focus was on technical and vocational training. Then by the 1980s, the economy was moving more into electronics and technology, so the educational focus quickly shifted to computer science, electronics, and engineering, and later also adding finance, biotech, and medicine. So as the economy evolved, so did their education system. These four crucial strategies grew Singapore's economy at an average of 7% each year. Contrast this to Jamaica's 0.3% average for 30 years, with a debt to GDP at almost 150% by 2012. The outcomes couldn't have been any different. There was no long-term planning or solutions, and also the two major political parties in Jamaica had vastly different views as to what direction to take the country. But now the year is 2025, and more we hear Jamaica being compared with Singapore. So let's see what it would take for this island to really become the Singapore of the Western Hemisphere. For Jamaica to catch up to Singapore's income level by 2030, the country would have to grow at a rate of 48% every single year. And if we push it back a little further to 2025, then Jamaica would still need a ridiculous growth rate of 17%. For context, China, one of the fastest growing economies in history, peaked at 15.2. A more realistic goal for Jamaica would be a 6 to 8% growth rate a year, and this would mean that by 2030, the GDP per person could reach 15,000 to 20,000 US dollars. That would mean a much stronger middle class, better jobs, and real wealth creation. If Jamaica wants to grow faster and become stronger like Singapore, it needs a plan that makes sense for the entire island, and not just one that benefits only a few elites. First, the country has to fix the basics. Debt must be kept under control, and government spending should be responsible. Red tape needs to be cut so businesses can start and run without unnecessary delays. Crime must be reduced, and the justice system has to be strong, fair, and efficient in order to be trustworthy, so both citizens and investors can feel safe. Next, Jamaica has to invest in its people. Schools and vocational training should give workers the skills that modern businesses need. Digital skills, engineering, and technical knowledge are especially important because these are the jobs that will grow worldwide. Higher education and training programs should match the industries Jamaica wants to attract. Infrastructure is another key step. Ports, roads, and airports must be upgraded to make trade and shipping easier. Digital networks should reach every corner of the country, and energy and transportation systems must be modernized to support new industries and businesses. At the same time, Jamaica needs to also attract investment. Special economic zones could offer tax breaks and faster approvals for businesses. Foreign companies should be encouraged to set up regional offices or factories on the island. Jamaica must be known as a fair, transparent, and safe place to invest. The country should also focus on key industries, like developing a logistics hub using its natural harbors. Renewable energy and carefully managed natural resources, like oil, could boost the economy, while also offering high-value services in finance and technology. And finally, the country needs long-term planning. Policies need to stay consistent across election cycles so that businesses and workers can trust the government's direction. The best way to achieve this would be to set up a new entity whose sole responsibility is to attract businesses to the country and give them real powers that they can use to encourage developments. If Jamaica follows these steps with discipline and consistency, steady growth of 6 to 8% per year is possible. By 2040, the country could have higher incomes, better jobs, and a stronger middle class, making real progress without needing a miracle.